Keeping hell under wraps, here's your relook at the NECA Hellraiser Series 2 Skinless Julia. The betrayer who became the betrayed, wife to Larry Cotton and lover to Frank Cotton. Forbidden desires indulged were enough to transform Julia into a murderer, but it was the Cenobites who carried out hell's retribution for her sins. But when Dr. Chenard resurrected her skinned visage from the bloody mattress on which she died, he also resurrected her lust for vengeance. Something we didn't do the first time we had a look at Julia was we didn't measure off how tall the figure stands. This is something I can go back and rectify by using the trusty tape measure that accompanies me on all of these reviews now. Where I couldn't do it before, I can now tell you that Skinless Julia stands 7.4 inches in height. And in centimeters, that works out to be 18.8 centimeters tall. Now, this was a figure I did want to go back and re-review at some point, but I knew I was going to be plagued with a lot of problems. This figure has a lot of difficult things going against her. We'll talk about all those in a second. For the accessories, though, she sort of has accessories based on the look that she's going with right now. If you desire the sported look of a bandaged Julia, a little bit more easier on the eyes, then she has those accessories. If you do want her skinned, however, Skinless Julia has other accessories. So we're kind of basing it from that. Just as you wanted to, in case you guys are wondering as well, she did not come with that clear display stand. I'm using it right now because one of the other issues that this particular figure has is she's next to impossible. Dare I almost even utter the word, she is impossible to stand. You need a display stand for her. Coming included with the figure that doesn't really affect based on whether you decide to have her skinned or skinless, she does come included with a heart. The heart is a nice accompanying piece. Think of the last time you can think of when a figure was included with an accessory of a heart. Oh wait, it's probably not a lot of them. The heart itself is really nicely detailed for how old it is. You can see there's some purple veins going on in there, purple veins. And some really nice detailed work on a paint job. They've added a bit of a clear coat to it to kind of give it that gross, slimy, like she just ripped this out sort of look. It's a really neat looking heart, and again, it's a nice accompanying piece to display with the figure. It actually does fit in her hand right now. We'll talk about that in a second. Bear with me, bear with me. She does also come with a pair of skinless arms. Doesn't really make much sense right now until we sort of start unraveling the mystery literally and quite figuratively. But as you can see, this is the skinless version of the arms. Younger viewers of this channel probably will be wanting to turn away in disgust. This is one of the other accessories she comes included with. I think the likelihood of us getting an ultimate version of Julia, and one of the reasonings why I did want to go back and re-review all of these Hellraiser figures, is because my newfound love for these figures with the recent released Ultimate Pinhead, which his review will be coming soon. It's very unlikely, though, we'll be getting much any other Ultimate figures. I can imagine we could probably get the female Cenobite, that's actually her name, like the Chatterer and probably Butterball. I would imagine like those four Cenobites, including, of course, Pinhead, will probably eventually make their Ultimate release. But I think other Cenobites, and specifically like the Franks and Julias, not so much. I can't imagine NECA going and doing all of those. You never know. I might find myself going back and eating a little bit of crow and re-reviewing those or reviewing those when they eventually come out. So anyways, I don't want to just stand in front of the camera waving these absent limbs from their torso. I'm just going to put those to the side for the time being. Okay, as I said, this is going to be a difficult figure to review. I've got the clear stand on the ready. I'm going to put that over there. And let's have a look at the bandaged version of Julia. It's a nice looking piece, though it's dated considerably for the decisions that they made at the time when they decided to create this piece. Like I said, there's a lot of real problematic issues with this particular figure, keeping her completely intact being one of them. The other real difficult standing issue is the fact that she doesn't stand whatsoever. I mean, they've got her in this really sort of sensual pose, but the sensual pose sort of eliminates completely the notion of being able to actually have her standing. I mean, if you just put her on a surface like that, it's the way her feet are sculpted, specifically this one right here, that causes all the more difficult reasonings for why she just doesn't stand. I mean, you're going to put her down and she's just going to topple over. Her head sculpt, though concealed right now with bandages, you can see that she is in fact, yes, missing her skin, and then she's wrapped with bandages over top. She's got bandages on her arms, and then she's got bandages kind of, well, this is a continuation that goes all the way down into her dress, and then she's got her dress. She sort of, in a way, harks back to the Bride of Frankenstein, kind of in the way that she's kind of designed with a dress and bandages underneath, or like the bandaged arms kind of really remind me of Bride of Frankenstein. She's got quite a lot of blood on her dress. The dress is more or less just a wrapped, thin material, although here on the NECA release, it's very thick, rubbery plastic. One of the real big issues that plague this figure is like all the things that go on her are really thick and dense rubber plastic. But you can see there's some blood stains on the sides soaking through the fabric. And then she's got the blood on her fingers where you can then take the heart. There we go. Here you go, have a heart. And you can have her holding it like that. So again, that would make some sense as to why there's some fresh blood on those individual fingers of Julia, and probably one of the reasonings why there's so much blood on her dress as well. Now she has to actually consume more souls in the second Hellraiser 2, whereas Frank really stole the skin in the second one. She really wants to come back to her full beautiful self, so to speak, so she does have to consume a whole lot more souls. So she doesn't really look like this too long into the film before she starts, reappearing and resembling her former self. Unfortunately, we never really got a skinned, or I guess skin version of Julia from NECA Toys. We only got a skinless version. So kind of get a good fancied look at how she looks right now. Some nice detailing done on the bandages. It looks like they probably have painted over top of maybe a clear plastic. Yes, unfortunately, these figures, I think, are still on the time period of which NECA was using a lot of clear plastic pegs, and these ones are very known to breaking. Ironically enough, of all the things that break on Julia, arms are not one of them. It's her head. We'll talk about that in a second. Oh, some sad news. You already told us it's her head. Get a gander at her tush. The sculpted look of the draping fabric is a nice touch, and it kind of got like a two-tone effect of the light and the more creamier blue coloring. Again, it's more of a rubber feel. I don't know if you can really kind of see it to gauge it, but it's a very rubber-like plastic material. It's very, very dense and heavy on this particular piece. Getting things off of her are going to be extremely difficult. Not as difficult, I would say, as getting things on her. The forcing of the head, the wrappings over top of her face are the more difficult things, and not something I would advise you doing too often. Decide very quickly how you want to display this figure. If you happen to get her brand new sealed in a package, congratulations. She's a harder figure to find, but decide quickly how you want to display the figure. Personally speaking, I would honestly go wrapped Julia, although the look of unwrapped Julia is rather, again, feasting for the eyes of somebody that loves Hellraiser, but I kind of like the look of her wrapped and bandaged. That's my personal preference. But for the sake of this review, I'm going to go ahead and take off the arms. I had to do a little bit of mending to wounds here, not my wounds, but I'm going to take off her arms, and as I said, arms certainly were not the thing that broke on Julia. I mean, she's using just really dense pegs that just peg into place. This causes articulation to be very limited on this particular piece. It really involves just her hands, it involves only her arms, and it would involve her head. Unfortunately, here's the problem with this figure. We take the limbs off, and I decided to do this in reverse instead of putting this on her, because again, I really don't want to do this too often. I did end up having to make some sacrifices. I had to cut. This actually wasn't even cut. So you can imagine even how much tighter it was to fit that over top of her head. But all you do is when you get this back on her, you're going to put it over her head and you're going to tuck it down the side of her dress. To get it off, basically is the same idea, but I guess you could start by taking the dress off first. Children, shield your eyes. We're going to just peel this off. And again, you see exactly what I mean. Like, because this is rubber, an appliance that in theory would be easier to put on the figure and take off, because it's so dense and it sticks and hugs around everything. It is very difficult to get off of her body. And again, you just want to wiggle this off like that, like that, like that, like that. There we go. And we're just going to throw that to the side. Then comes the part I'm really not looking forward to. I will tell you well in advance that I did actually have to glue the head in place. I'm just going to peel this off. This is why I made the incision. Judge me if you wish, but I feel like the incision saves you a lot of possible damage if you haven't already broken the head on this particular figure. Forcing this over top of her head will most definitely result in breaking that peg. Nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and continue pushing through. Yeah, there we go. I had glued it. There we go. I'm just going to pop this off. It's extremely tight around her head. I did have to glue it in place because it is using clear pegs. And the result of it, though, is when you do get the figure's head off, or you get the masks, the bandages off, it is probably going to break the figure if it hasn't already broken it. And sadly, this is what we're dealing with. I really would have actually hoped that the glue would have stayed in place. But again, like trying to wrap this over top of her head, do this once. Decide very quickly which way you want to go. Anyways, this is what the head would look like. I'm probably between this and final looks, probably going to have to glue it yet again. Maybe I'll just ultimately settle for displaying her with a skinless alternative. Obviously, I can't just have a figure with a completely broken head. But yeah, one of the areas I would have reinforced this had I was NECA, working for NECA back in the day, releasing these figures. Clear peg is already a bad idea. Clear peg, when you're putting wrapped tight rubber bandages over top of it, is guaranteeing that you're going to break the figure. I feel like I can't even push forward the rest of this review with simply holding the figure in place. So I think between now and the rest of this review, I might take a little bit of a cut, and I might just glue this head back in place, and then we can go ahead and resume the figure review from there. Several moments later and several dabs of glue later, I've managed to repair skinned Julia's head. I know, unfortunately, this is only going to be a temporary fix because, again, when I go back to put the head appliance over top of her head, it's ultimately just going to break and snap the glue yet again. You remember that definition of insanity, the idea that you can do the exact same thing over and over again and expect different results? Well, this isn't the definition of insanity because I know the result every single time. I'm going to be tortured like many of the people found in hell. I know every single time I'm going to put on this very constricting rubber appliance. Ultimately, I'm going to be breaking off that glue every single time, and ultimately I'm going to be reaching off to my desk drawer and pulling out my little glue bottle to fix this back in place. I think I'm just going to ultimately settle and just keep skinned Julia like that, skinned. What we are getting here is a presented version of skinned Julia. I would imagine not be able to be passable nowadays by releasing these figures in stores. Skinned Julia probably would be a no-no, I think, for a lot of censor boards, and parents would probably be very against the idea of skinned Julia. It was clever in the way that NECA packaged this figure, as far as I remember, with all of the things already on her. You got the fun job when you got this home of taking everything off of her the first time around to actually see what she looked like underneath, and rather a gruesome looking sight underneath. I apologize to younger viewers watching this. This is probably the second apology I made because I probably said the exact same thing in the very first review of Skinned Julia, but about the same thing applies here as well. I know I have a lot of older viewers watching this, so that's partly, obviously you guys aren't going to have as much the issue with it. It's not really something I would even say Hellraisers are recommended watch for younger viewers anyways. I know you guys are all clever, you guys watch your horror films anyways. But a gruesome looking sight for Skinned Julia. Does it look like Julia, the actress that plays her? No. I mean, it just looks like a smiling, doesn't even really look female either until you start kind of looking at the rest of her body. The face is just a smiling skinned cadaver, but other than that, I mean, I wouldn't be able to place what this character is from. Obviously, in the film, it's more or less they've just put prosthetics over top of her face and just masked it off with makeup. Here, NECA Toys had to sculpt this from scratch. And I guess for what it was and how long ago this figure came out, it's not a bad look for Julia, if, again, you can suspend some disbelief as to the idea that it even looks like her. In a way, her and Frank are really the only exceptions of human characters really inhabiting the world of the NECA Hellraiser releases. because really all those NECA releases were Cenobites. It's a lot easier to pass off a likeness than trying to do something like an actual portrait of a human character. Again, I know that all the Cenobites started as humans. Really a nice looking sculpted piece. It holds up well now for at least its sculpt. Granted, yes, the likeness doesn't look like her, but the sculpt is definitely pretty good. Where it really suffers, though, is definitely how you start looking at the legs. The legs, first of all, her torso is turned this way, which really doesn't aid in helping this figure to stand whatsoever. But then she's got a leg that leans forward. That's another strike against the figure. And then she's got a leg that leans to this side and bent. Well, if you're taking tally and adding up everything, that's a really bad score of what could be a strong standing figure. You can see that she's got all the bones and tendons and all like the skin muscle tissue making up the majority of her body. Primarily, she's all red, obviously, with a few little areas of bone that's been painted in an ivory color. Ironically enough, she still has that ivory color also in her fingertips, a nice touch. And if you wanted to display her, you could still take that heart and you can put it inside of her hand. She holds it this way as well. The thing also is that the problem with this particular figure is that the arms do look just awkward. Pegging them in place, she sort of has a sway off to the side on the one and a drooping back on the other. Every single thing on this character, arms, hands, legs, knees, and legs, all seem to want to be going different directions. Nobody got the memo as to which way we want to be facing this figure, and like everything is all over the place. Like I said, the arms, the legs, the knees, the ankles as well. For the sculpting of what it is, the sculpt is good, but it really lets itself down by having such irregular and really poorly decided upon posing for this particular figure. As I said, with the way that she is right now, she's next to impossible. She is impossible to stand. She looks good, and for, like I said, for this being a skinless representation of Julia, she fits the bill for what she is. She'll never really... I can't see she ever really getting an ultimate version of this character, which I think by that point NECA Toys would likely just wrap her in wrappings, or again have the swappable arm treatment where you could just pop the arms off, pop them back in. But I think this would definitely be fabric by this point. It would not still be rubber. And most definitely when it came to the head appliance, again, we'll just look at that right now, this being rubber is such the worst idea they could possibly have come up with. Couple that with the fact that you've got clear pegs in the neck. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. And hopefully, as I've conveyed in this review, I mean, when you start putting stuff on her, you're guaranteeing that the figure is going to break. Okay, so articulation on Julia. Like, her head would normally have had a ball joint. I mean, that's basically, that died a long time ago. There's no chance in me doing anything with her now. You can move the arm back, you can move, I mean, basically they're just pegged in place. And then you can also rotate the hand. I always found like the hands were stubborn in the sense that if I wanted to twist and rotate them, they seem to want to just start moving on their own back to the way they originally were. And that's basically it. That's all the articulation you're going to be getting on her. I know you're like looking at this section right here and you're seeing it cut and assuming probably the same thing I assumed when I got this figure for myself, that she have articulation in the leg. Technically, you could say yes. Technically, in the sense that even if you move the leg back and forth with it, it really is a stubborn bend. You can't, I mean, you can move it, but kind of like the arms, you can see like the leg just wants to move back to the place it started from. So even if she does have that V-cut articulation in her thighs, you really can't rotate anything on this figure. Basically, it just boils down to the arms, the hands slightly, and the head, if the head sadly wasn't already broken. I'm sure if you could come up with a list of things not to do when designing and creating a figure, Julia would pretty much have all of those boxes checked. She unfortunately does have clear pegs for her articulation, well, at least on her head. The arms are just regular pegs. You don't have to worry about those at all. But the head is on a clear peg. That's already a strike. Early figures that I've picked up through the NECA Cult Classics and basically around that time frame all used clear peg systems, and that ultimately meant that all those ball hinge joints that they were using over time would crack, break, and then you'd have broken arms. I mean, you probably have seen a couple of my re-reviews of various figures like the Seed of Chucky set. That set's barely holding together anymore because everything on those figures were clear pegs, and every single time I get those figures out of the packaging or out of their little baggies again, I've noticed something else is broken on them. One day I'm going to go back to them and they're just going to be a pile of dust. So she does have clear pegs. That's already a no-no. Then on top of that, she has awkward standing. She's sculpted in a way that's supposed to be sensual, I suppose, but it's sort of, nothing feels like it works together. Her torso is twisted one way, her leg is bent another, and then she sort of has her thigh twisted in an awkward way that guarantees that this figure is not going to stand on her own. You're definitely going to need a stand of some sorts if you want to display Julia for yourself. But the biggest strike working against this figure is the additional rubber appliances that you put over top of her. The dress is already a big no-no, but then you got to put the wrapped head over top of her. Those wrappings are all done in very constricted rubber as well. So when you put that over top of a clear peg, you guys are pretty smart. You can probably already know where this is going. This head is broken repeatedly. Repeatedly. And that's why I would say if you pick up this figure for yourself, you can do one of two things. You can either keep it permanently in the packaging, or if you want to tempt Lady Luck for yourself, get it out of the packaging and decide immediately how you want to display the figure. I started this review with her in wrappings. I'm ending this review with her in the skinned version. I'm probably from this point on going to decide one more time which way I'm going to display the figure, and I'm ultimately going to settle on that. I mean, I only have so much glue to work with. I could go out and pick up more. But the problem is this figure's head is going to continue to break based on a very constricting appliance that they put over top of a clear peg. Just a whole bunch of no-nos. Again, the likelihood that we'll ever get an ultimate version of Julia, I think if anything, if Lady Luck is smiling down on us, maybe we might get ourselves a human version of Julia. A skinned version is very unlikely, but I think NECA has learned from previous mistakes that moving forward, if we do get figures like this, the likelihood of a skinned Julia is very next to nothing. But I still think that if they do ever release figures like this moving forward, clear pegs are definitely going to be something that they're not going to consider, and most definitely putting rubber pieces over top of a figure that you have to force on top, you just know, again, you're asking for trouble. And one of the reasonings why I wanted to review this figure so long ago, re-review this, and why I've been so apprehensive about the idea, because I knew the head was going to break, and you probably already saw in this review that cringeworthy crack when I tried to take the bandages off her head. I knew right away what it was, you knew right away what it was, but nobody wanted to say anything because the glue had broken yet again. If you managed to pick up this figure for yourself, what do you guys think of Skinned Julia from the NECA Series 2? The other thing about this particular series, the one thing that stands out, is the second wave also were all the build-a-pieces for the Pillar of Souls. That is a really nice piece, which I did re-review a long time ago. If you guys wanted to go back and have a look at that, I might actually even take that out from the tickle trunk myself, and maybe consider doing the idea of a re-review of the Pillar of Souls. Again, another piece that I don't think we'll ever get a re-release from. So if you were lucky enough to get all of these NECA Hellraiser figures back in the day, congratulations. Give yourself a self-high five. Hey, either way, let me know what you guys think of Skinned Julia down below. And if you are new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, turn on the bell notification, and stay tuned because there's going to be a whole lot of videos coming your way. We're going to be doing a little bit of half and half. No, I'm not talking iced tea and lemonade, although I got to say that stuff is delicious. I'm going to be doing a lot of newer figure reviews, as you guys, of course, are expecting to see. But we're going to dabble every once in a while in the past, having a look at figures like this with a fresh coat of paint, a fresh perspective, and hopefully better studios, thanks to producer Tony. Producer Tony's got his thumb sticking out. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming your way, so keep your peepers peeled for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.